Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wal aqibatu lil muttaqeen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala man kana nabiyyan wa adamu bayna al-ma'i wa tin. Amma ba'd. فقد قال الله تعالى في القرآن المجيد والفرقان الحميد قد أفلح من تزكى وذكر اسم ربه فصلى بل تؤثرون الحياة الدنيا والآخرة خير وأبقى صدق الله العظيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم وسل عليه الصلاة والسلام عليك يا سيدي يا رسول الله وعلى آلك وأصحابك يا سيدي يا حبيب الله. واجب الاحترام قبلة علامة صاحب, واجب الاحترام elders, Buzurgs, brothers in Islam, my honorable friend, colleague and student Muhammad Qasim Saab. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakat. I thank everyone, in particular Muhammad Qasim, for inviting me to your lovely masjid. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless this community. May Allah ensure that this masjid is a means of our salvation in this world and in the hereafter. My sincerest thanks to you as well for sacrificing your precious time on a Sunday evening for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I pray and I hope that this will be a means of our salvation on the day of reckoning. Inshallah ta'ala, today, as you know, the topic area that we want to talk about is materialism and mental illness. And this comes under the heading of Islam in the 21st century, a very important topic area, something which I think touches the need and requirement of today's climate and today's conditions. So immediately, I think this masjid, the organizers, the committee deserve my thanks and gratitude for showing that they have their finger on the pulse of our community. They want us to speak about issues which affect us all, which is dominating our lives. So I hope and I pray that what I have to share with you goes some way at least in identifying what is happening in today's society and how we can tackle it. The theme itself, you've put on the poster Islam in the 21st century. Even this title, I think, needs some deliberation and it needs some reflection. The reason being is that we have to remind people constantly that Islam is the religion which, subhanallah, which will be around until the day of Qiyamah, whenever that is. Islam matters for Muslims 200 years ago. It matters today. It matters in 2,000 years' time or whenever Qiyamah is. And we sometimes neglect the fact that the Quran and Sunnah is so beautiful. It is so dynamic. It is so special that it can accommodate for all ages, for all climates, for all conditions, and for all predicaments that we come across. Take a moment to reflect upon what has happened in the last 1,400 years or so. And what you will marvel and understand and appreciate is that a lot has happened in history during that time. But all of it, Islam, the Quran, the Sunnah, was beautiful, perfect, and wise enough to deal with these circumstances. Islam has gone through the Crusades. We, within Islam, saw the fitna of false prophets. We've seen sectarian differences. We've seen so many conspiracy theories throughout the centuries which have been aimed at belittling Islam. We've seen the rise and fall of different empires. All in the last 1,400 years, we've seen world wars. We've seen the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. We've seen industrialization. We've seen secularization. And today, we have new problems in the form of fake news, obesity, mental illness, knife crime, racism, sexism. Do not ever think that Islam won't be able to deal with these problems. That is so important. And I worry that our youngsters today, when they read the headlines, when they look what is happening in society, the West is trying to convince them that everything you see around you are new predicaments. They are new situations. They are modern problems. And the reason why they are doing that is to give you the impression, may Allah protect us all, that Islam can't help you. Because your religion is old. Your religion was revealed in the Arabian deserts. What on earth can it do to increase your understanding of the modern world? And for us, la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, this whole thought is completely wrong. And so that is why this topic area is so important. And in particular, we keep reminding ourselves that Islam is well equipped for the 21st century. It is equipped to deal with all of our predicaments, all of our concerns, until the day of Qiyamah. That is the beauty of the Holy Quran. That is the beauty of the flawless Sunnah of Sayyiduna Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So the topic area is materialism and mental illness. And what I want to do, inshallah ta'ala, is start with a general observation, two observations. The first one is about materialism. I think you will all agree with me that materialism is on the rise. What is materialism? Materialism has been defined according to different stakeholders in different ways. So people in religion will define materialism in their own way. People who work in economics will define it in their own ways. People who are philosophers, they will have their own definition of what materialism is. For us, and for the purpose of this program, materialism, I'll put it simple, is just basically this idea and this belief now that we see around us that goods, wealth, commodity, gadgets, cars, they are the most important thing in life. That this world is everything, the dunya that you see around you. All that matters is what you own. All that matters is what shirt you're wearing, what watch you're wearing, which postcode you are living in Birmingham. That is what materialism really is. Materialism by its very nature is short-sighted. It only extends to the dunya. And as a result of that, if a person is considered as materialistic, then automatically almost he is distant from the spiritual realm. What is spiritualism then? Spiritualism is the idea and belief that there's more to goods, gadgets, and commodities. It's this idea that there is a second world. It's this idea that we haven't been born into this world just to consume, eat, and then die. We are the ashraful makhluqat, the most noble of Allah's creations. Every single thing in this world around you, even down to a cockroach, to a flea, to a fly, it has a purpose behind its creation. Now, if we are the most noble of Allah's creation, then it automatically means that there must be some purpose behind us being here. That is what spiritualism is. So there are many indications, and I will share some of them with you, to suggest that materialism is on the rise. And that is more dominant than ever before. And as a result, and we will talk about this in a moment, as materialism rises, it means there is another correlation and another pattern. And what is that? That spiritualism is going down. But let us see how we can show that materialism is certainly getting stronger and stronger. I will share with you 2 or 3 points. Number one, you will see that money and wealth is the sole criteria for success in this day and age. Go back 200 years ago. Go back to, a society which was more normal, perhaps before industrialization. If you ask this question, that who is successful in your community, then there would be different criteria by which a person could be judged as being successful or unsuccessful. I believe that 200 years ago, if you asked this question, then people would have answered that a successful person is a person who is content with what Allah has given to him. A successful person is someone who brings nafa and benefit to his community. A successful person is the one who has left a legacy behind. Today, in this day and age, what we find is success is only determined by how much money you have, irrespective of the condition of your heart. And we see that all of the time. We see celebrities, we see pop stars, we see sports individuals who are considered as successful. And when you scratch beneath the surface and ask, well, what makes you think that they are successful? They say, well, they have money. Andrew Tate is considered successful by some people. And the only reason he's considered successful is because he has accumulated wealth. That is the only factor behind it. He has not been considered successful because he is morally upright, or he is kind and considerate towards others, other factors which Muslims would consider as serious. 7-8 years ago, you might remember the figure. His name is Sir Philip Green, an individual who is very prominent in the politician circles. Sir Philip Green is the owner of the Arcadia Group, a large retail business. He's a billionaire himself. About 6-7 years ago, he bought the struggling department store BHS. And his whole intention behind buying BHS was simply to steal the pension pot from it, sell it, and move on. He did that very successfully and made close to £600 million from it. BHS as a department store, it failed. And he was seen as solely responsible for its failure. He himself, however, made £500 million out of it. Is he considered successful? Ask the Tory politicians, ask the people who write for the Times. They will have all the praise in the world for Sir Philip Green. Why? Because we live in a society where you only judge success by how much money you have, whether you have a yacht, whether you have an address in Monaco, whether you have a postcode in Knightsbridge. Morality doesn't come into success anymore. A person is successful if he is driving a Range Rover. He is considered a failure if he is still driving a Toyota. This, in my opinion, suggests that we are living in a society which is obsessed with the material. Number two, what we find is that we need things, let's face it. We're not against consumerism per se. We find that we need things, we need gadgets, we need cars, we need transport, we need homes, a roof over our heads. But I think you may agree that today purchases are not based on need anymore, on zarurat. There used to be a time when you would go to the shop when you needed something and that was the end of it. I think nowadays we are living in a generation where you are spending for other reasons. And reasons which I think is really messing with our minds and questioning whether we are doing the correct thing. I'll give you a simple example, is that we seem that we are buying purely because we can. Because we can buy things. Because we can have 6 different jumpers when we only need 2. We can have a driveway of 6 cars when, let's face it, we can only drive 1 at a time. Our consumption is based on greed a lot of the time. When it comes to clothing now, what you will find is that up and down the country, the charity shops, they are inundated with clothes. Why? Quite simply because we are buying too much now. And the fashion industry is changing at such a quick pace that people find that the clothes that they have in their homes, they are considered obsolete now or out of fashion. So they dump it in the charity shop. The fact that there are so many clothes in the charity shop is an indication we are simply buying too much. We are not buying based on need alone. We are buying now just to show off. A Range Rover is no longer a form of transport. It's almost a statement now. And there are so many cars, so many gadgets, so many material things around us which follow that same kind of pattern. It's a statement really about who you are. So many fashion brands, so many watches, so many handbags, which are just basically making a statement. It's not necessarily about the product itself. We live in a society where we buy just to show off. You know, people are buying, for example, you know, this drink called, what is it called? Prime? Allahu Akbar. It probably tastes like washing liquid. But, you know, social media has convinced us that we need to buy this and to show off to others. This, in my opinion, shows that we are living in a very materialistic world. We are buying now to keep up with society. We've always said that, you know, We want to keep up with the Jones. We want to keep up with what the neighbors are doing. I think that is more evident than ever before. We are just buying to fit in. We are purchasing things just so we don't feel out of place or out of fashion or behind. Whatever phone you have in your pockets, I promise you, I mean, if it's a smartphone, I promise you it'll probably be sufficient to last you for 5, 10, 15 years. That is the way that phones are built nowadays. They're built to last. They are very good products. They are built to last, and they are built to ensure that, the software can keep up with time. How many of us actually keep a phone for 5, 10 years, though? Very few of us do. And the capitalist and consumerist society is convincing you that the model that you have in your hand is old, it's obsolete. You're going to look weird in your workplace if you're branding a phone which is from 2015. It's almost pressure now that I need to buy the latest gadget, I need to buy the latest phone. And unfortunately, we all fall victims of that. This, in my opinion, is giving an indication that materialism is on the rise. Other indications, acts which are associated with spiritualism, with the heart, with ruhaniya, they unfortunately are disappearing in society. We are less caring and compassionate. This week, you would have seen the way that the refugees have been perceived by the media. There is a hotel in Skegness where refugees are staying. They have been surrounded this week, and there have been demonstrations outside it. Basically, they want to kick them out. A few days earlier, the same was happening in Liverpool, very similar circumstances. The language, and I'm not even talking about the right-wing newspapers, I am talking about the actual politicians. The language employed by politicians when it comes to immigrants, when it comes to refugees, is very disturbing. It is very inhumane. It shows that spirituality and that care, that sympathy, that idea that, well, this refugee, this could be me tomorrow. I could have been in that similar situation. Or I need to remind myself that my father or my grandfather was also an immigrant from Pakistan or India into this country. He went through similar difficulties. That kind of sentiment, they are disappearing. We don't care anymore. I get that impression. And caring is a sign of the heart. It's a sign of spiritualism. 3 years ago, every single Thursday during the pandemic, the government was asking you to stand outside, to bang your spoons and saucepans together and clap to show your appreciation to NHS workers, to show your appreciation to the key workers for the amazing help that they provided during the pandemic. They were heroes. You remember that very well. It showed at that time, at least, that we had a heart. 3 years later, the same government, it wants us to demonize nurses. It wants us to demonize care workers. So why are they asking for more money? They are going to lead to the collapse of the economy here. The collapse of the economy is because they want more wages. 3 years ago, they were heroes. Today, Allahu Akbar, the government wants you to make them zeros. Forget the headlines and forget the politics behind it. The only reason I share this example is to show you that as materialism rises, spiritualism decreases. Feelings about the heart, compassion, care, love, mahabba, this kind of vocabulary disappears as materialism increases. Hate is normal now. You can get away with saying the worst possible things on social media. You might have heard only a fortnight ago what Jeremy Clarkson had to say about the royal family. There was a hoo-ha for a day or two. He hasn't lost his job over it. People had a chuckle and laugh over it. It shows how extreme hate has become now. It shows that the condition of our heart, there is something wrong with it. All of these are indicating to me that materialism is on the rise. At the same time, and I have touched upon this already, is that as materialism increases, we are finding a second trend simultaneously. We have more gadgets. We have more disposable income. We have more clothes in our wardrobe. But at the same time, we are becoming an unhappy nation. We are becoming a depressed nation. And this started way before the pandemic. We cannot put the blame on the pandemic alone. Mental illness is basically the name we are giving to that sentiment now. What is mental illness? Mental illness in its simplest form is quite simply sadness, depression, anxiety, negativity, feeling low. When that happens over a prolonged period of time, then we call that mental illness. You know, a person is sad, depressed because his favorite football team lost. We won't call that mental illness because it's only very, a short period of time that a person beats himself up because his favorite football team lost. When depression continues over a long period of time, then we call that mental illness. What we find is that today, all of the stakeholders, the government, the newspapers, the celebrities, on social media, people are talking about mental illness. Allahu Akbar. The strange thing is that the people with the money, the people with the gadgets, the people with the disposable income, they are the same people who are saying that we are suffering from depression. We are suffering from anxiety. How many headlines have you come across where it's famous celebrities, even royalty, pop stars, sports individuals who have millions, but they say we are suffering from mental illness? It's a Western problem. Mental illness, I don't think so anyone's even heard of it in Africa. It's certainly a disease which we see that is overcoming Europe. So this, so far, is what we're seeing is two trends. Materialism is on the rise. Our obsession and fixation with goods, commodity, and wealth. Simultaneously, however, what we find is we are getting less and less happy. What I want to share with you, and this is the purpose of the talk, is that are these two things related? Is there a correlation between the fact that in terms of material, we are getting stronger, better, swifter, and much more productive? And yet at the same time, we are becoming a sad nation. We are becoming a nation which is not content, which don't sleep well at night. Is there a correlation between the two? That is what I want to discuss. Let me make it clear that when it comes to mental illness, there are many factors involved in the rise of it. I'm not simplifying things here. I am not saying that mental illness has come about purely because of our obsession with the material. There's lots and lots of factors which have led to the rise of mental illness, of sadness, depression, anxiety, and so forth. Sometimes it's because of the fear of the past, fear of the future. Sometimes it's a tragedy in the family. Sometimes it's just basically a person is going through a rough patch in their lives owing to family problems, owing to economic problems. Maulana Shakir Ali Noori, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserve him, he is of the opinion, and I'm sure many of you will share this sentiment, that guna, sin, is the real cause of mental illness today. It's because when you do a good act, it automatically makes you feel better. Allah has put sukoon and happiness in good acts. No one feels bad when they give sadaqah. No one felt bad reading Salatul Maghrib here earlier. Good acts by nature make you feel better. Again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what has He done? He has put guilt, remorse, and bad vibes in sin. Nobody feels happy after sinning. And because we live in a society now where sinful behavior is apparent, where it is left, right, and center, it is on our phones, it is on our streets, that perhaps has led to the rise of mental illness. So there are many factors involved in the rise of mental illness. Let me make that abundantly clear. But certainly, materialism and our obsession with it is one of the key, main, pivotal factors in the rise of mental illness, in the rise of sadness, depression, and anxiety. And this is something we have seen throughout history. It's not something related to the 21st century. The more people turn away from the spiritual, the more ill they become. This has always been the pattern of society. So inshallah ta'ala, what I want to do is to explain to you how materialism and sadness, depression, and anxiety do relate to one another in the realm of Islam, in the realm of the Quran and Sunnah. Number one, and this is very, very important, this is perhaps the most important part of the speech. Allah has put lasting peace in the spiritual and not in the material. Allah has put sukoon in the spiritual. Allah has put itminan in the spiritual. Itminan is an Arabic word. We use it in Urdu. I am sure that you have come across this term. Itminan we translate as tranquility, ease, rest. Why? Because the world by its very nature is fluctuating up and down, good days and bad days. And when a person reaches a level of itminan, then irrespective of what is going outside in the world, his heart, he feels content. Allah has always put that peace and itminan in the spiritual. He has not put it in the material. Let me explain that through the human body. Your beautiful, amazing, miraculous human body, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created it perfectly. What He has done is that in your body, He has given you certain impulse points, parts of your body, limbs and organs, which can feel certain sensations. For example, you can see things, beautiful things, with your eyes. So your eyes is a receptacle for that sensation. You can hear things with your ears. Allah has given you beautiful hands. You can touch things with that. You get certain sensations from that. Allah has put 10,000 taste buds on your tongue so that you can tell the difference between sweet and sour food. It's a sensation that Allah has given to you. Allah has put sensations in your private parts as well, both man and woman. These are receptacles. But what you will find is that with the ears, the eyes, the touch, the private parts, when it comes to all different parts of the body that receive different types of sensations, they are always short-lived. They are always very temporary. They give you entertainment for sometimes only seconds. You taste something beautiful. You know, you're amazed by it, but that feeling, it disappears after a few seconds. You touch something velvety. Then you come across a beautiful sensation. But how long does that sensation last? It only lasts for a few seconds. This is with the entire body, is it not? Allah has enabled you to receive moments of thrill, excitement, adrenaline, chaske, what we call in Urdu. But what you will find with the entire body, this is very short-lived. It is only sometimes for a few moments. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created the engine room, the epicenter of the human body in the form of the heart. Just like the ears, just like the eyes, just like the hands can feel different sensations, the heart can also feel different sensations. It is also a receptacle. Now, the difference between the heart and the rest of the organs and the limbs is that, subhanallah, when it comes to the ears, the eyes, the fingers, the private parts, the thrill, the happiness, the excitement and adrenaline you receive is short-lived. There is only one place in the body which receives happiness and thrills, and it is more permanent. It is long-lasting. It is something which resides there for a long time. Subhanallah, and that is in the heart. And the heart, by its very nature, it really accepts the spiritual, the ruhani. It doesn't really like the material. You know, the gadgets, the cars, you know, the lovely images, the handbags, and all of that. You know, it never really touches your heart, does it? You know, someone smiling at you, someone giving you money when you needed it, someone ringing you when you needed to hear a voice, someone helping you out when your back was against the wall. These are acts of spirituality. And what these acts, what do? When you receive these acts, where does it go? It goes to the heart. And so by very nature, because it comes to the heart, straight away it is going to the best part of the body. And number two, it is a more permanent feature. So you have to understand that the pursuit of the material is only giving you short-term thrills. And that is where addictions come in. Addictions come about because the short-term thrills, a person is disappointed by it. He feels that he didn't get enough. I feel it wasn't long enough. It wasn't high enough. So what happens? The person, he's convincing himself in the evening that I need to do it again because I want to go higher. I want the feeling to last longer. But the human body is not designed for that. There is a limit of how much thrills you can receive from your eyes, your ears, your hands, your private parts. There's a finite limit of that. And man, by his very nature, he falls into addiction because he thinks, no, this time is going to be the best. This time is going to be the greatest sensation of them all. He never reaches that point. It leads to frustration. He keeps wanting to do it, wanting to do it, wanting to do it. And that is where addictions come in as well. Addictions come about because we are trying to satisfy the other limbs and organs of our body, and we are not trying to satisfy the heart. This is the reality of it. So we are not getting that real satisfaction and content. Real satisfaction and content lies with Allah and His Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Staying with that point is that we have to ask ourselves that, the cars, the gadgets, the lovely postcodes, the yachts, the holiday destination, are they really making us happier? The West is convincing you that if you have a lovely car, you're gonna become happy. If you have a perfectly toned gym body, then you're gonna be happy with yourself. The outer. I'm not convinced by that. Let's take social media as an example. We see today that social media is basically a means now by which we can see how others are living, what they own, what they possess, where they are holidaying, what they are eating, what they are wearing. A large part of social media is about that now. Is examining in detail the life of the rich and famous, the ones who are beautiful, the ones who are perfect. And we think this is entertainment for us. We think that this is going to make us feel better. We think that this is making us happy because we see a beautiful mansion on our phones when we swipe on Instagram, when we swipe on Twitter. Is this really making us happy? Our youngsters today, they are on their phones. They are swiping constantly for hours on end on TikTok, on Instagram, on Snapchat. They're looking and becoming obsessed and fixated with the lives of the rich and famous. Sometimes hours on end in a day. Over time, when you and I, when we are looking at all of these images, sooner or later, you're going to ask yourself, well, this individual is holidaying in the Barbados. Why haven't I been Barbados? I must be doing something wrong. You see on social media that the person is wearing a £10,000 watch. Why haven't I got an expensive watch? Why am I wearing a Casio? A person is scrolling and he sees a beautiful, gym perfect photoshopped image of someone. A person looks at the mirror and says, well, why don't I look like that? When we do that all of the time, then this is leading to serious repercussions in our own life, and it's not making us happier. Number one, when you focus on the lives of others, especially when it comes to the material realm, what happens is that it leads to dissatisfaction with your own life. You're not happy with your own life now. You're convinced now that I'm a failure because these people are living in nicer places, they are driving nicer cars, they have more gadgets than me. A person ends up focusing solely on what they don't have. And then, Allahu Akbar, they forget the things that they do have in their life. You don't become very grateful as a result. You're always complaining about the things that you don't have. It's just making you happier. It's not going to make you happier. Over time, if you are focusing on the images, if you are focusing on the gadgets, the possessions and wealth, the material aspect of others, then over time, you will feel envious. You will say sooner or later that I wish this disappeared. I wish their yacht blows up tomorrow. I wish, they end up with leprosy. You end up with negative thoughts. Is that making you any happier? All you are doing is burning, in the words of our messenger, alayhi salatu wassalam, your good acts. When a person has envy for others, all he is doing is burning his good acts. When people are flaunting their wealth, their looks, their possessions, their gadgets, their home, constantly to others all of the time, and people do not realize this, you end up in a trap where you might be subject to what we call bad nazar, the evil eye. You know what we call al-ain in Arabic. The Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam explained that the evil eye is haq, it does exist. That sometimes when you show off too much, when you flaunt your life too much, you might get 6 people saying Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, MashaAllah to you, but you will end up with 2 or 3 people who will be saying La'natullah upon you as well. They'll send bad vibes, they'll send bad du'as your way. The ulama will tell you that there are plenty of people in our society who are suffering from this. They come to our scholars and say, we feel that someone has done something on us, that there is some kind of bad vibe in our homes. These are the same people who flaunt their homes, their children, their possessions, their clothes, their bodies, all of the time on social media. So is this obsession with the material, is it making us happier? I don't think so. It's making us any happier. It's not making us more content. So this is the situation that we have. I think there is a strong correlation between the rise of materialism and how we feel about ourselves, what our inner condition is like. I explain, and I will reiterate this point, that there are many factors involved when it comes to how and why mental illness has developed in the last decade or so. Many factors involved. But certainly materialism is one of those. How do we tackle this issue? I said at the beginning that Islam, it is well equipped to deal with all of the situations, predicaments, and problems that we have today, yesterday, and until the day of Qiyamah. So what does Islam have to say about all of this issue? If materialism cannot provide happiness, where do we find happiness? Where does that lie? In order to answer this, we need to understand that by humans, we are looking for pleasures. We are looking for content. We are looking for a smile on our faces. But we just don't know where to find that. What does Islam have to say about that? Islam says that in haqiqat, in reality, the only true pleasure is Allah. And in particular, the vision of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To be in His realm. I'm going to take you back right to the beginning of time. All of us were there. In the Holy Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gathered the rules of every single individual to live. And it is mentioned beautifully in the Holy Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took the souls of every single person. You were there, I was there. And He asked that beautiful question, Alastu bi rabbikum? Am I not your Lord? Every single person, everyone here gave the same response. We all said, Bala, of course. But that majma, that mahfil, that gathering, is not just important in the sense that we affirmed in Allah. It was important because we had the best start to our life. And what was that start? We stood in the presence of Allah. We conversed with Him. That was our apex. It never got better than that. That was the most beautiful and perfect start to our lives, where we were introduced to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For everyone, it didn't get better than that. We were in the presence of our Lord. We conversed with Him. We responded to Him. In this life now, whether we realize it or not, we're trying to find pleasure. We're trying to find some kind of happiness and content to reenact what we felt on that day when we all said Bala in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Some people are finding it in gadgets. Some people are finding it in cars and money. Muslims understand that this is to be found in Allah alone. So what do we do as Muslims in this world? We cannot wholly reenact what happened on that day when we were in the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But we have moments of thrill when we at least remind ourselves of that day by doing good acts. When you go on Hajj and you are in the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you feel a sense of rejuvenation and happiness. You feel at peace. Indirectly, what is that doing? It's reconnecting you to that first day when you said, of course, Bala in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you give sadaqah, and you give sadaqah to the extent that your left hand doesn't know what your right hand has given. You're giving it knowing that Allah will give you, the rizq in this world and in the hereafter. What happens to your heart? It goes upwards. There is an uruj of it. Indirectly, what is it doing? You are finding the pleasure related to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Reminding you of that first meeting with your Lord. When may Allah give us life so we can celebrate the beautiful month of Ramadan? When we fast in the month of Ramadan, it is a shame. We completely neglect and forget about the material. We are totally indulgent in the spiritual. Standing for 2 hours after Salatul Isha, after fasting for 14 hours in Salatul Taraweeh becomes easy for us. Why? Because we found, at least in part, what we experienced on that day when Allah said to us, Alastu bi Rabbikum. That is the real pleasure. That is the ultimate pleasure. The ultimate pleasure is the vision of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whereas in this world, we see small snippets of this. We see small examples of that. What are we working towards in reality, this dunya that we are in? It is all working towards Jannah. Where finally, once again, we will reenact that moment when we met Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In Jannah, there will be palaces, there will be hoors, there will be fruits, there will be cars, there will be gadgets, there will be camels, horses, you name it, it will all be there. These are all the material. Allah will give you the material there. But what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also say? I'm going to give you something which is greater than Jannah and all of its contents in the Akhirat. And what is that? The opportunity to finally see me in Jannah. That is the ultimate goal of going to Jannah. When we were born, when we were just a soul, a speck, in the presence of Allah, we witnessed for a moment the beauty of our Lord. All Jannah is just going back to that point, but in a more permanent basis. That is the ultimate goal of our lives. And that is the ultimate sukoon, it is the ultimate pleasure. You will forget the hoors and qusurs when you see Allah. You will forget the fruits. You will forget your palaces made of gold and silver bricks. You will forget that each person will have 100 personal servants. You will forget the fact in Jannah that for morning, lunch, and afternoon, 70 trays of food will be brought to you each and every day. You will forget all of that once you have seen Allah in Jannah. It is the greatest pleasure of them all. That is the real aim of it. So I think when we talk about solutions to this very materialistic world, one of the things we have to do is to talk about Jannah more. And this is something which I find we don't do enough. We don't talk about Jannah as much as we should do. And I take responsibility as an imam, as a teacher. I think we should, as to our youngsters, tell people that, you should be talking about Jannah. You should be, talking about what you want to do in Jannah. You should fantasize about Jannah, although it's not fantasy, it's reality. You should be drawing up your bucket list of what you want to do in Jannah. If you do that, you will forget the difficulties, the pareshanis and anxieties related to the dunya. So our vision, by its very nature, has become very short-sighted. It's not long-sighted enough. It's not long-term. The more we think about Jannah, the more we will forget about the material, deceptive nature of this world. The more we will remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give us something different. Materialism, the second point I want to mention about solutions, materialism is not new. We as Muslims have our own term for materialism. And what is that term? Hubbud dunya. Love for the dunya. And for us as Muslims, this is the beginning of all mistakes, of all turmoil and all unrest. Every single problem, anxiety, parashani in our lives, it comes down to hubbud dunya, love for the world. Hubbud dunya, in the large array of ammunition and weapons that shaitan has in order to deceive us, hubbud dunya is the most powerful weapon. It's coming from him. He is convincing us that this world is perfect and beautiful. It's amazing. You got places to go. You got food to eat. You got gadgets to enjoy. You got parts of your body that you have to serve. And he, by his very nature, wants us to forget about the akhirat. He is making us believe and become totally immersed in this fact that the dunya only counts. Hubbud dunya for us is the root of all evil. And you know very well, and I don't need to spend time about what Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam have said about the nature of the dunya. It's passing. It's a moment in time. It's just basically, it's a test for us. We are going elsewhere. It's a stopover. You know, if you're traveling to Pakistan and you stop for 2 hours in Dubai, you know, when you get to Dubai, you know it's only a short stopover. Do you start unpacking your luggage in the airport? Do you start getting comfortable there? You never do that. Why? Because you know that this I'm not staying here long. My real destination is Pakistan, it's India, it's Islamabad, it's Delhi. You'd be a fool if you start getting comfortable in Dubai. But that is what has happened with, quite simply, the nature of us, Ya Rab, may Allah protect us. We are just sitting in Dubai and getting comfortable about it. We forgot that we have a flight to catch. We forgot that we are going elsewhere. That is the nature of this world that we are living in. We celebrated the beautiful night of Isra wal Mi'raj only a few days ago. The most beautiful and miraculous night in the life of our Habib Sayyiduna Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. You know, there were so many lessons to be learned from every single aspect of the life of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Just this one episode of Isra wal Mi'raj, subhanallah, it's like an ocean without shores when it comes to the treasure of knowledge and wisdom you can learn from it. There are so many different stories and episodes from which we can learn so much. On this beautiful night, Sayyiduna Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam were journeying with Sayyiduna Jibreel alayhi salam when they came across a very peculiar and strange scenario. Our Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam saw that there was an old lady sitting. She was unbelievably old. She had one foot in the grave, frail, knocked out. In fact, the words of the hadith say that she couldn't even support herself. When she was sitting, she had to put her arms like this so she could support her body. You could tell just by looking at this woman that she's on her last leg. She has moments to live. Despite all of that, the same woman insisted on adorning herself with every single type of jewelry possible. She had gold and silver from head to toe. She would bling basically from head to toe. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam passed by her with Sayyidina Jibreel. This woman spoke up. She said, Ya Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, unzurni, Ya Muhammad unzurni, as'alka. That, oh Muhammad, look at me. Oh Muhammad, look at me. I want to ask you something. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam did not look towards her. He simply moved on. He did not respond. As the journey continued and once that scene had disappeared, Sayyiduna Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam asked Sayyidina Jibreel that, who was that woman? What did she represent? She was old, She was frail. She was obviously on her last legs. Yet she insisted on adorning herself with jewelry, gold, silver, platinum, you name it. To which Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam said, she represents dunya. She is basically the symbol of what dunya is. It gives you the impression that, look, I'm good looking. Look at this gold, look at this silver. Look at the zenith. What is the point where it ain't gonna last? How many days have you got to enjoy that gold? How many days will you have that jewelry on you? What is the purpose of adorning something or enjoying something which is over in a flash? This is an amazing, representation of what we should really be considering when it comes to the relationship with the material and the relationship with the spiritual. We define, and I mentioned this before, is that the third point that Islam really stresses is that we want to be happy. We want content and sukoon in our lives. I think we need to really scratch beneath the surface and ask ourselves, what is truly making me happy? And again, you will find it's acts of spirituality that make you happy. It's that which brings joy to you. Take the example of Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He was anti-material almost. He lived on the bare minimum. His hujra mubarak, it never had any furniture or anything in it. It was very, very simple. Yet at the same time, subhanallah, he was the happiest individual in his community and society. He found content. You know, when you buy things, ask yourself, is this making me happy or is it making society happy? You know, by nature, ask yourself, and this is a very important question, does giving satisfy me or does receiving satisfy me? And what you will find is that most of the time, giving always satisfies more than receiving. Sayyiduna Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, Al-yadul ulya khayrum min al-yadil sufla. The higher hand is better than the lower hand. Meaning what? That normally when you give, it is the higher hand, is it not? And when you receive, it is the lower hand. Our master, our beloved Sayyiduna Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam explained that giving is always more satisfying than receiving. And you know very well that the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, throughout his life, all he did was give and give and give. Whenever he received, what did he do? He gave it to others, subhanallah. Volunteers in today's society are happy people. You know, the ones that work in food banks, the ones that help out, for example, in times of tragedy, like we have seen in the earthquake in Turkey and in Syria. These people are happy now. They see a lot of hardship, parishani and anxiety and bereavements. But inside they are happy. Why? Because they're giving. People who donate to the food bank, people who go to Tesco's, who go to Sainsbury's and buy £100 worth of grocery for their home for the month. But on the way out in the basket, they leave £20 of goods in the basket for the food bank, for the people who are less well off in society. They leave the superstore happy individuals. People who give charity and sadaqah so that, no one knows in society, secret sadaqah. They're the same people who sleep better at night. And with that in mind, please, we talked at the beginning about how materialism is on the rise. It's getting stronger and stronger in society. At the same time, and many of you might agree with me here, I see that there is also an anti-material movement in our society too. It's not all doom and gloom. There are still decent people in society. There are still people in society, Muslims and non-Muslims, who volunteer, which is an act of spirituality. It's not an act of material. There are still people of society who care for the immigrants and refugees. There are people in society, and this movement is certainly growing, who hate waste. who don't like it when Amazon, they send you a small USB stick and the packaging is this big for it. Straight away, they get agitated by this. Why are they wasting this? There are people in society who go to the restaurants and cafes and see food left over and they get vexed by it because it's waste. There are good people in society who are seeing pollution, chemicals being dumped into the rivers, left, right, and center, which is happening this week. And they get very upset by it. These are acts of spirituality. They are not acts of the material. The material realm is strong, I know that. But do not think for one moment that the spiritual is fighting a losing battle. I don't think so that is the case. There are still very good, decent people in our community who have hearts. And you see them in all religions, all genders, all ethnicity, all creeds. We salute those people. These are the people that bring community together. These are the people which matter to us. There is a movement now. And again, we talked about how we live in a society which are obsessed with the rich, the famous, the ones who have the expensive cars and watches and so forth. I have seen that there is a movement away from that now. Youngsters who hate Hollywood. Youngsters who have worked out the very shallow representatives of Hollywood, these actors and actresses. People who have followed the story of Epstein and Harvey Weinstein and all of these others and realized that these people ain't role models. These people have got nothing to offer to me. These people are using me. These people are making millions out of me. People are coming to that thought now. People are realizing the very fake facade that Hollywood has been projecting for many decades now. People have worked it out now. So do not think that this here is the end of it. Don't think that materialism is ever dominant. I think there is definitely a movement which realizes that this material thing is not bringing me any happiness. It's not bringing me content. That the same celebrities who have everything are the ones who are unhappy with their lives. The penny is finally dropping, and I think in society we are seeing people now that it's acts of goodness, it's acts of giving, it's acts of mahabba, it's acts of saying salam to someone, acts of helping the granny across the road. These are the things that make me happy, and these are the people that bring content. Why? Because it's going here. It's not going to the rest of my body, it's going to the most beautiful and perfect organ of my body, my heart. That same heart, which is the only organ which will come handy on the day of Qiyamah. يَوْمَ لَا يَنْفَعُ مَالٌ وَلَا بَنُونَ. On the day when no money, no children will come handy. إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ. The only thing that will come handy on that day is a person who comes with a peaceful heart. The last point that I want to mention, and inshallah ta'ala, we will finish with this. I would love to hear your comments and questions at the end if you do have some. I always depend on feedback. I always depend on your opinions as well. وَفَوْقَ كُلِّ ذِي عِلْمٍ عَلِيمٍ. Above every learned person, there is always someone who is more learned. What is success? We said at the beginning that success nowadays is being solely translated as money and wealth. That if a person has $1 million in the bank, then he is successful. A person is taking employment benefits, then he has failed in society. A person drives a Bentley, he is successful. A person who is still catching the bus to work, he has failed. We see that all of the time. Let's listen to what Islam and what the beautiful Quran has to say about what real success is. And I think this verse, it summarizes everything that I have said in the last 50 minutes or so. So in reality, what I have shared with you, it is the tafsir. It is the explanation of the verse that I'm about to recite to you from Surah Al-A'la. What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? قَدْ أَفْلَهَ مَنْ تَزَكَّى. Certainly, without doubt, the person has found success, the one who has purified himself, who has done tazkiyah, who concentrates on his inner, not on his outer. Tazkiyah is always about the inner, it's not necessarily about the outer. He's cleaning his inside. In particular, he is cleaning the heart. And how is he doing it? وَذَكَرَ اسْمَ رَبِّهِ فَصَلَّى. He remembers the name of his Lord and he performs salah. That is real success. Success is when you remember Allah. And when you remember Allah, you automatically fall into sajda. Because you remember how much Allah has given to you. You don't focus on what He hasn't given to you. You know as a Muslim that Allah will give you everything in Jannah anyway. Even if you live in this world and you have everything, how long can you enjoy it for? You're going to your grave. Enjoyment and dunya is oil and water. They simply don't mix. Because no matter how much you enjoy your billions, and there's plenty of billionaires in the world, how long can you enjoy it for? Steve Jobs was a billionaire. How long did he enjoy it for? At least in the next world, you can enjoy it for longer. What does Allah say? And this is beautiful as well. He mentions success, and then Allah in the next verse says, بَلْ تُؤْسِرُونَ الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا. Allah prescribes the problem. He goes, the problem is rather you have become affected by the dunya. That is what is blurring your idea of what success is. بَلْ تُؤْسِرُونَ الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا. It is having an asr on you. وَالْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ وَأَبْقَى. The next verse, subhanallah, what does Allah say? He goes, don't look at the dunya. It's useless, it's futile, it's worthless. It's not even worth the wings of a mosquito in the eyes of Allah, according to the Hadith Sharif. وَالْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ وَأَبْقَى. The Akhirat, Jannatul Firdaus, that is better, وَأَبْقَى, and it will remain baqi, it will remain forever. There is no end to it. You can't even say Jannah is 1 billion years. 1 billion by its nature is finite, there is a limit. You know, the Akhirat is infinite. It is there forever. Then, and this is the way that this surah finishes, إِنَّ هَذَا لَفِي الصُّحُفِ الْأُولَى. Allah says this has been mentioned in the first scriptures that were given to mankind from the prophets and messengers. صُحُفِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ وَمُوسَى. In the scriptures of Ibrahim and Musa. Why does Allah mention that? That this fact, that success is in the remembrance of Allah, success is in salah, and a warning that don't get affected by the dunya. The akhirat is better for you. It lasts longer. Why at the end of mentioning all of this, why does Allah mention that this has been mentioned in the scriptures from the time of Ibrahim and Musa? Allah is explaining that human nature has always suffered these predicaments. It's always been like this. Man has always been greedy. Man has always been materialistic. This problem is not new. You know, you have show-offs today, right? You know, read the Quran. What was Qarun? Qarun was the biggest show-off of them all. And what did Allah do to him? فَخَسَفْنَا بِهِ وَبِدَارِهِ الْأَرْضِ. Allah opened up the earth and the earth swallowed him and all of his property as well. It's not new. And that takes us full circle, and it takes us back to the title, you know, of this talk, which was Islam in the 21st century. Human behavior fundamentally doesn't change. Man has always been greedy. Man has always been subject to anger. Man has always been envious. Man loves it when good comes to him. Man always loves it when people praise him and pat him on the back. Human nature fundamentally doesn't change. The climate, the weather, the clothes, and the houses change. The way humans behave, it doesn't fundamentally change. If human behavior doesn't change, it means that what the Quran and Sunnah said all of those years ago about human nature, it hasn't changed either. The guidance still matters. Your country, your language, your clothes have changed. But human behavior by its very nature, it doesn't change. And that is why these problems, whether they are projected as being modern, contemporary, new problems, in reality, we keep reminding ourselves that modern problems always have classical solutions. And the best way to deal with these solutions is always from the Quran and Sunnah. It's always from that perfect book which is with us until the day of Qiyamah, no matter how much society goes through, no matter how much change it goes through. That the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ mattered yesterday, It matters today, it matters tomorrow as well. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enable us all to purify ourselves in the inside. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from the dangers of the dunya. Ameen. Wa ma alayna illa al-balagh.